The first thing I noticed when I walked into the laundry room was that her green heels were still damp. They were on the floor, crooked, kicked off in a hurry, like she couldn't wait to get them off. I bent down to pick them up, and there it was, a smear of dried grass and something pink stuck to the side. Lip gloss, not hers. I stood there for a moment, holding the shoes like they might answer me. I already knew, but I still checked the back pocket of her jeans lying in the hamper. Still opened her purse sitting half-zipped on the kitchen counter. Still opened the door to the dishwasher just to feel like I was doing something, like one of these meaningless objects might suddenly shout, "Hey Milo, here's the part where she started lying to you." It's not that I wanted to catch her. It's that I wanted the universe to prove me wrong. That's where I was mentally on Saturday morning, 7:42 a.m., while my wife was still in bed, snoring lightly, her phone screen face down on the pillow next to her like a buried secret. The night before, she had gone to her coworker's annual garden party. I was supposed to go. I really was. I even ironed a shirt. But at the last second, she said, "You know, maybe it's better if I go alone." You always say you hate small talk. She wasn't wrong, but her saying it first made me feel like a guest in my own life. So I stayed home, folded towels, replaced the vacuum belt, ate leftover spaghetti, standing at the sink like some washed-up sitcom dad. Around 10:30 p.m. I texted her, "How's the party? Everything good?" No reply. At 12:02 a.m. she sent a single message. "Staying at Marcy's. We're both too busy to drive. Love you." But then my cousin Ash called around 1:15 a.m. I didn't answer at first, but he kept calling and texting. "Dude, you seeing this? Check Marcy's Insta story right now." So I did. It was short, maybe 8 seconds long, but those 8 seconds made my throat close up. There was music, a bunch of people dancing on a patio. The camera pans left, and there she is, my wife, standing close to a guy in a navy shirt, laughing so hard she nearly spills her drink. He says something to her, leans in, and she turns her head toward him. It looks like a kiss. I pray it's not, but the clip ends before I can tell. What I can tell is what she says right before it cuts out. She shouts over the music, "God, I'm so tired of married life." And then she laughs, loud, free, like it was the truest thing she'd said all year. I watched it 30 times, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't help myself. Her voice looped in my head like a scratched record. Tired of married life? Tired of me? That morning, when she finally woke up and stumbled into the kitchen in one of my old shirts, I asked how the party went. She yawned. "It was fine, chill. Marcy got sick, so I just stayed to make sure she was okay." I looked at her for a second, not accusing, not angry, just trying to see if anything in her face would crack. It didn't. She smiled and asked if I could make her toast, and I did, like a fool, like a man making breakfast for a stranger wearing his shirt. By Sunday afternoon, the walls of our house felt thinner, not physically, of course, but emotionally, like every smile she gave me was pressed against cheap drywall, waiting a collapse. I kept thinking about that clip, that one moment she probably didn't even remember saying, "Tired of married life." It looped in my head like a ghost tapping at the back of my skull. She hummed while folding the bed sheets as if she hadn't just said something that cracked the foundation of everything we'd built. I watched her from the hallway unnoticed, and that's when the thought hit me harder than anything else. She looked peaceful, relaxed, like a woman who had finally shrugged off a weight she didn't plan to carry anymore. That weight was me. But I kept playing the role. I kept pretending we were still on the same script. I made us lunch, grilled cheese. She said she was craving something simple. I guess I should have picked up on the irony. We didn't talk about the party. I didn't ask. She didn't offer. The silence between us was too polite to be comfortable. Then something strange happened. Around 5:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. No missed call, just a message. I wouldn't usually listen. I get spam calls from weird area codes all the time. But something about the timing felt eerie, like the universe had decided to hand me a loaded envelope, and it was up to me whether or not to open it. So, I pressed play. There was background noise at first. Music, people laughing, a bit of wind. Then a familiar voice. Marcy's voice, whispering something in a hurried hush tone. She's leaving with Aaron. She told me not to say anything, but she's already in his car. She said she'd text you later. Don't shoot the messenger, Milo. Then a click. The message ended just like that. No context, no apology. Just a grenade lobed straight into my stomach. I stared at the wall for a full minute before moving. Aaron. I knew that name. He was the new hirer on Fallon's team. Some freelance guy from Seattle who came down to refresh the brand image or whatever. She had mentioned him twice, always casually, like he was just another part of her day. But I remembered how she'd said his name like she was tasting something sweet without meaning to. I went outside. I walked our dog longer than usual just to avoid being in the same room as her. And when I came back, she was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under her again, scrolling through Pinterest like a teenager planning a wedding that already happened. I sat down across from her and asked carefully, "How's Marcy feeling?" She looked up, startled, then shrugged. She was still out of it when I left. Hopefully better today. A lie. A smooth, practiced lie that rolled off her tongue like it wasn't even a decision. I felt something in my throat. Not anger, not sadness. Just this thick, heavy thing like guilt, but poisoned. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I realized I had trusted someone so deeply, and she was now weaponizing that trust like a silent dagger. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing, staring at the ceiling fan. My phone lit up again at 10:04 a.m. Another message. This time it was a photo. No caption, just a blurry image, obviously taken from a distance. A parking lot, maybe. In it, Fallon was leaning against a silver car. Aaron's car, if I had to guess. He was close. Too close. She had her hand on his shoulder and he was looking at her like she was the only person left in the world. I didn't recognize the number that sent it, but I didn't need to. Somewhere, someone wanted me to know. Someone couldn't stand the way she was getting away with it. And I suddenly felt like the last person to show up to my own collapse. I got out of bed, walked into the living room, stood in the dark. No thoughts, no tears, just that same cracked silence spreading. I thought about waking her up, asking her, confronting her, but I couldn't because part of me still needed it not to be true. Part of me still hoped that somehow there was a version of events that didn't end with her laugh echoing into another man's car. But deep down, I knew the version I was clinging to didn't exist. The next morning I made her coffee, not because I wanted to, because I needed to. I needed the normally, the mechanical routine of pouring water and waiting for it to brew, of pretending everything was still intact. But my hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the mug. Fallon didn't notice. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, laughing softly at something I would never get to see. Probably a meme. Probably a message from Aaron. I stared at her across the counter. My wife. My person. And for the first time since we met, I felt like she was a stranger playing a part she no longer wanted to memorize. She looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong, like her world hadn't shifted, like mine wasn't slowly imploding from the inside out. "Thanks for this," she said, lifting the coffee to her lips. You always make it better than I do. I almost told her right then about the voicemail, about the photo, about the growing storm inside me that was no longer a suspicion but a series of undeniable facts stacked like bricks on my chest. But I didn't. I just smiled back like a coward and went to take the trash out because that's who I was now. The husband who knew too much and said nothing. While outside, I looked at our car. It still had her jacket draped over the back seat, lip balm rolling in the cup holder. But what caught my eye was a faint handprint on the rear window. Just one, smudged, faint, but fresh. Something about it made my stomach turn. I reached into the back and checked her gym bag. Still there, still untouched. She hadn't been to the gym in weeks, so where was she going after work? When I got back inside, she was upstairs getting dressed. I opened her laptop. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But something inside me, call it instinct, call it desperation, pulled my fingers to the trackpad. Her browser was still open. The last tab was a map of a hotel downtown, a boutique place, not somewhere her company would book for work. No corporate discounts, just exposed brick walls, soft lighting, and overpriced wine. I checked the reservation system. She hadn't logged in, but she had clearly been looking, planning, thinking ahead. When she came back downstairs, I tried to act normal. "You working late today?" I asked, not even sure if I was ready to hear the answer. She glanced at her watch. "Yeah, might be a long one. Don't wait up." Okay, that phrase again. Don't wait up. Like I was just some roommate who made her breakfast and kept the lights on. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask, why? What does he give you that I don't? But I didn't. I nodded, and then she left. Just like that. But this time, I followed. I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my keys, and drove downtown. I parked across from that boutique hotel and sat in the car with my heart in my throat. I didn't even know what I expected to happen. Maybe that she wouldn't show. Maybe that I'd find some way to rationalize it all. But at 6:42 p.m., she appeared. Not with Aaron. Alone. She walked in wearing a coat I hadn't seen before. Cream cold, long, elegant. The kind of coat you wear when you want to impress someone, not your husband. Someone new. She didn't come back out. 2 hours passed, then 3, and then something even stranger happened. Around 9:30 p.m., a different car pulled up. Same guy from the photo, Aaron. He parked, got out, and walked into the side entrance, confident, familiar, like he'd done this before. I didn't follow him. I didn't want to see what I already knew. I just sat there in the dark watching. At 11:17 p.m., they both came out separately. She walked ahead of him across the street like nothing had happened. He stood by his car, waited until she turned the corner, then left in the opposite direction. They had choreographed it, planned the distance, timed the exits, kept just enough space between them to make it look like coincidence. It wasn't. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for an hour with the windows down, letting the wind slap some kind of clarity into me. It didn't help. When I got home, she was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her shoes were lined up by the door, but not the heel she left in. She had changed them out, swapped her purse, hung her coat, like she had rehearsed the act of being home. I stood in the doorway and watched her fake sleep, breathing slow and even. And I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until that moment. She was already gone. Long before Aaron, long before the party, maybe even long before the red nails. And I was the idiot still trying to catch up. I couldn't remember the last time I felt like a man in my own home. Every corner of the house started to feel like it belonged to someone else, someone she was becoming without me. The toothbrush next to mine, the jacket she'd left tossed over the stair railing, the sin of her conditioner lingering in the bathroom. All of it felt curated, like set pieces in a performance she wasn't inviting me to watch anymore. I wasn't her partner. I was her audience. And the show was a slow, private unraveling where I wasn't even allowed to applaud. The next day she acted like everything was normal. She asked what I wanted for dinner. She even made a joke, something about how our dog had more loyalty than most humans. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. But that line, that one stuck with me. More loyalty than most humans. Was it guilt bleeding out in the form of a passive comment? Or was she trying to tell me something without actually telling me? I needed answers. I was too far gone to ignore it anymore. And yet, I was too afraid to confront her outright. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 4 years. My brother, Clay. We weren't close anymore, not after the fallout over a business deal gone bad. But he was sharp, resourceful, and the kind of guy who knew people who could find things out without leaving fingerprints. I didn't tell him everything at first. I just said I needed help confirming a suspicion. He asked, "Is it about Fallon?" I hesitated. Then he said, "Thought so. I saw her 2 months ago. She didn't see me. She was at a bar on the east side, not the kind of place you go for girls' night. She was with someone. I figured it wasn't my place to say anything. I sat there holding the phone like it had suddenly grown fangs. "You think it's that serious?" I asked. "I think you've been ignoring a burning house," he replied, and pretending the smoke was incense. He gave me a number. A guy named Henner said he was discreet, not cheap, but thorough. I didn't want to believe I needed that kind of help, but I called the next morning. Henner didn't ask questions. He just asked for her schedule, her car make, her workplace. He didn't promise anything. Said it might take a few days, might take a week. I wired the money, and just like that, I was now the kind of man who hired someone to follow his wife. It was raining when I got home that night. I stood in the garage for 10 minutes before going inside, just watching the rain hit the windshield. Fallon greeted me like she always did, with a soft, distracted smile. She asked how work was. I said fine. She said she might have to go out of town soon for a leadership summit her company was organizing. I didn't even blink. She mentioned it like it was routine, just another line in a conversation where the Real story lived between the pauses. Later that night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't proud of it. I'd never crossed that line before, but I picked it up. The screen showed a message preview. "Room booked. Same place. Friday. Can't wait to see you again." No name, just a number. No heart emoji, no pet names. Just clean, transactional betrayal. I placed the phone back exactly where it was screened down. She came out of the shower humming, her hair wet, face clean, her skin glowing in that way that used to stop my breath when we were newlyweds. And now I couldn't even look her in the eye without imagining her face pressed into someone else's pillow. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about Friday, about the hotel, about what she was planning while I was washing her clothes and feeding our dog. I lay awake until the sun started creeping in through the blinds. And by the time I heard her breathing shift into deep sleep, something inside me had shifted too. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was humiliated. And it was no longer just about whether she was cheating. It was about how carefully she had calculated this. How she had rehearsed her lies until they became second nature. How she smiled through every one of them. How she still let me rub her back at night knowing full well she'd be with someone else by the end of the week. Henner texted me the next afternoon. She left the office at 2:13 p.m., drove to Easton Hotel downtown, spent 36 minutes inside, left with Aaron J. Colton, license plate confirmed. Want photos? I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. I didn't need the photos, because the picture in my mind was already worse than anything Henner could send. Friday came fast, like time was trying to rush me towards something I wasn't ready for. I spent the morning moving through the house like a shadow. Everything I did, pouring cereal, brushing my teeth, petting our dog, felt robotic, like I was watching myself from a few feet above, floating, weightless, numb. Fallon came downstairs around 7:40 a.m., dressed better than usual, her blazer freshly pressed, her hair curled into that effortless wave she only bothers with when she's trying to impress. She kissed me on the cheek, not the lips, grabbed her bag and said, "See you tonight." I didn't reply. I just nodded and watched her walk out the door. And then I followed. This time I didn't wait. I didn't pretend. I got in the car 5 minutes later and followed her all the way across town. She didn't go to the office, not even close. She took the highway south and pulled off near the convention center, parking at a boutique hotel tucked behind a sushi restaurant. I waited 2 blocks down, heart racing, palms sweating, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I nearly tore the leather. And then, right on schedule, he arrived. Aaron. He didn't even hesitate. He walked straight into the hotel, checked his phone, and vanished inside like he had done this before. Because he had. Fallon followed minutes later, head low, sunglasses on, blending in like this wasn't her first time sneaking around. They were too calm, too practiced. And that's what gutted me the most. This wasn't an affair built on passion. It was built on routine, on structure, on betrayal that had been carefully engineered. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Instead, I parked across the street, locked the doors and waited. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Run in and yell, cry in the lobby. I couldn't bring myself to decide. I just sat there for hours, long enough to watch other couples come and go. Some laughing, some holding hands. One pair fighting near the valet station like their world was falling apart. I wanted to tell them they were lucky. At least their pain was happening in the open. At least their wounds had air. When Fallon finally reemerged, it was almost 2:30 p.m. She was alone. Fresh lipstick, smile on her face. She looked satisfied, not in the physical sense, though I didn't want to think about that. No. She looked emotionally unburdened, like she had just been seen and heard in a way I hadn't been able to give her for a long time. She walked to her car slowly, checked her phone, laughed quietly at something, and then she drove off, not back toward work, but toward the spa on Holcomb Street. She was extending her day, extending her lie. I didn't follow this time. I'd seen enough. Instead, I drove home, took the long way, rolled down the windows and let the cold air stab at my face just to feel something sharp. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sky had started to gray, and the wind carried that sin of rain that always made me think of fall. I sat on the front steps for a long time, thinking about how much time I'd wasted believing this woman would always love me. Then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to cry in front of her. I wanted her to see what it looked like when the man she underestimated the most suddenly stopped playing dumb. So I called Henner, told him I wanted more. I wanted texts, times, confirmation. I didn't want assumptions anymore. I wanted a record of her destruction already ahead of you, he said. Check your email. I opened the files he sent and felt my throat close with each screenshot. Fallon's name, Aaron's number, a booking confirmation for room 314, a timestamp from 2 weeks ago, another from 3 days ago, a digital trail of deceit, all tied to her, all so detailed. It made me nauseous. But nothing hit me harder than one short message she had sent him at 9:14 p.m. last Wednesday night. He still has no clue. Honestly, I don't even feel bad anymore. That's when I cracked. Not loudly, not with a scream, but with the quiet kind of devastation that happens when you realize the person you give your soul to felt absolutely nothing while setting it on fire. She didn't just cheat on me. She stopped respecting me. She stopped seeing me. And now she had someone who made her feel powerful again. Someone she could laugh with while she used me like a backup charger for her real life. I spent that evening preparing something I never thought I'd have to. An exit, not revenge. Not a dramatic blow-up, but a slow, clean departure, a silent vacuum. I made copies of all the documents. I backed up the files. I created a folder and labeled it Truth. I made arrangements with a friend in another state to crash with for a while. I transferred some money into a separate account she didn't know about. Not a lot, just enough to remind myself I wasn't totally helpless. When Fallon came home later, she kissed me again on the cheek. Always the cheek, she said. We should go somewhere soon, just the two of us. Reconnect. And I smiled. A real one this time, because now I was the one keeping secrets. I started sleeping with the door half closed. It was a small act, subtle, barely noticeable, but it was mine. For weeks I had felt like an uninvited guest in my own life, tiptoeing around Fallon's moods, pretending I didn't know what she was doing behind my back. But now, I was the one setting boundaries. It wasn't about privacy, it was about separation, distance, the physical symbol of the emotional divide between us slowly becoming permanent. She didn't ask about it, didn't ask why I stopped making her lunch in the mornings, or why I'd retreat into the guest room with a fake reason about needing silence for work. Maybe she noticed, maybe she didn't care. She was still glued to her phone more often than not, smiling into the screen like it held better versions of her future. I watched her from behind doorways, windows, corners. I watched the woman I once loved become a stranger who couldn't even tell she was being observed. And that made it easier to detach. Then something unexpected happened. Something I hadn't planned for. Something I should have seen coming but didn't. Her sister showed up. Jenna had always been the blunt one, loud, messy, allergic to small talk. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and yet there she was, standing on our porch Saturday morning with a duffel bag, sunglasses, and the look of someone who had no time for pleasantries. Fallon came downstairs in a robe, mascara smudged like she hadn't expected visitors. Thought I'd surprise you, Jenna said. You said last month you were feeling unanchored. I took it seriously. Fallon forced a laugh, her eyes darting nervously toward me. I greeted Jenna with as much warmth as I could fake. I didn't trust her, not because she was dangerous, but because she was perceptive, and Fallon knew it. I can see it in how stiff she became, how she clung tighter to her coffee mug, how her smile strained when Jenna asked what we were up to that day. We weren't up to anything, and that silence said more than either of us wanted. Jenna stayed the night. She made a point of sitting next to me at dinner, asking small questions in her usual scattershot style, but then dropping sharper ones when Fallon got up to use the bathroom. How are you really doing, Milo? I blinked. I'm good. You sure? You seemed tired. I smiled. Work's been intense. She stared at me like she knew I was lying but wasn't ready to push harder. And Fallon, I just said she's been busy. That was all I had to give. But Jenna had always had a sixth sense for tension. She didn't let it go. The next morning I overheard them in the kitchen while I was in the hallway pretending to look for my phone. You don't touch him anymore, Jenna said, blunt as ever. I watch you, and it's like you're living with your accountant, not your husband. I don't know what you mean, Fallon replied quickly, her voice clipped. You do, Jenna shot back. And if you don't fix whatever this is, you're going to lose him. There was silence. Then Fallon said, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. I felt the air leave my lungs like I'd been punched. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't rage. It was worse. Quiet honesty. Words that didn't need force because they were born from resignation. My wife didn't want to fight for us. She wanted an out. And now she was whispering it out loud to her sister in our kitchen, while I stood in the hallway like a forgotten coat rack. Later that night, Jenna cornered me while Fallon was in the shower. She's not herself, she said. She's acting cold. I don't know what's going on between you two, but whatever it is, fix it or leave. Don't let this rot. I looked her in the eyes and said, it's already rotting. She didn't ask for details, but I saw it click. She left the next morning, hugging Fallon a little too tightly and me a little too long. Fallon watched her drive away, then turned to me and said, she always makes everything feel dramatic, doesn't she? I said, nothing. That night I made my final move. I sent the folder of evidence to a trusted friend, someone I'd known since high school, someone who had helped me set up the new bank account. He was quiet, loyal, and he owed me more favors than I could count. I told him to hold on to the folder and send it to Fallon's HR director only if I didn't call him by the end of the following week. He didn't ask why. He just said, understood. This wasn't revenge. It was protection. Because what Fallon didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Aaron wasn't just a coworker. He was a contractor hired on a short-term basis with strict company policies about internal relationships. And Fallon was about to be promoted. A big one. When she had cried about 3 months ago, telling me how much it meant to her. She had everything to lose, and I was done losing. I didn't expect to find myself driving to her office on Tuesday. It wasn't in the plan. I was supposed to wait to let everything build, accumulate, grow heavy until it could no longer be ignored. But after everything, after watching her move through our house like she was already gone, after hearing her tell her sister she wouldn't mind losing me, something inside me snapped. Not with fire, not with fury, just this low, creeping exhaustion that said, you don't have to wait for the collapse. You can start the exit now. So I drove to her building. It was glass and metal and all things sleek, a reflection of the image she curated so well, powerful, composed, untouchable. I parked a block away and waited. It was almost noon. I knew she usually stepped out around 12:15 for lunch. The day was overcast, thick with that kind of humidity that makes your skin itch even when you're still. I sat there with the windows cracked and the folder of evidence on the passenger seat. I didn't even open it. I knew what was in it by heart. Time-stamped photos, screenshots, location logs, calendar entries she didn't think I had access to. I knew it all. I just didn't know how to use it yet, or if I even wanted to. At 12:12, she walked out. She wasn't alone. He was next to her. Aaron, smiling like a man who believed he had already won. And maybe he had. Fallon was laughing, touching his arm lightly, wearing the same coat I had once bought her for a trip we never took because she said work was too overwhelming. They crossed the street and entered the wine bar across from the park. I followed on foot slowly, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the traffic. I stayed outside. I didn't need to hear the words. I'd heard enough already. But then something unexpected happened. They weren't alone. Another woman joined them. I couldn't make her out clearly at first, but as she leaned forward, I saw her face and my stomach turned. It was Fallon's manager, Amelia. I'd met her once at a fundraiser. She was sharp, stoic, the kind of woman who rarely smiled unless someone was being fired. She was Fallon's direct superior, and she looked curious, not angry, not amused, just observant, like she was watching a game she hadn't been invited to play. I backed away before any of them could spot me and drove straight home. My mind raced the entire way. What was Amelia doing there? Was this planned? Had Henner sent the folder already by mistake? Had someone else tipped her off? By the time I walked through the front door, my shirt was sticking to my back and my hands were trembling. At 3:46 p.m., I got a call. Unknown number. I didn't pick up. It rang again immediately. Same number. I answered this time cautiously. Milo, this is Amelia Fallon's manager. My throat closed for a second. Yes. I believe we need to talk in person. I didn't ask how she got my number. I just asked, where? Coffee house on Maple and 10th, 30 minutes. She hung up. I showed up 25 minutes later. Amelia sat near the back, phone face down, black coffee in front of her. She didn't smile when I approached, just gestured to the seat across from her. I'm not here to hurt Fallon, she said, but I need to know what you know, because what I suspect will become a problem for her and for the company unless someone's honest with me. And I believe that person is you. I told her everything. Not emotionally, not like a husband unraveling, just facts, dates, names, patterns. I left the folder on the table. She flipped through it slowly, her face unreadable. When she closed it, she looked at me for a long time. She's been up for a promotion to regional director. She said she'd be overseeing 3 offices. A massive leap, but this. She tapped the folder. This is policy violation, ethics breach, and professional misconduct. I nodded. I didn't want to ruin her career. You didn't? She replied. She did. Then she leaned forward. You're not the first husband to sit across from me like this. I blinked. Excuse me? She's not the first employee to think the rules don't apply to her, she said. But you? You're the first one who didn't come in here screaming. That tells me you already made peace with walking away. I didn't say anything. Here's what's going to happen, Amelia continued. I'm going to handle this internally, quietly, discreetly, but you should be prepared. When it comes down, Fallon's going to look for someone to blame. It won't be Aaron. It won't be the system. It'll be you. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was wrong, but because I knew it was exactly what Fallon would do. I thanked her and left. Drove to the lake and sat on the edge of the pier for almost an hour, watching the ripples, feeling the wind, wondering how something so slow could feel so violent. When I got home, Fallon was already there. She was in the kitchen pouring wine, swaying slightly to music I didn't recognize. You're late, she said without looking up. I know, I replied. Dinner's in the oven. I made that casserole you like. I watched her from the doorway. For a second, I almost felt like nothing had changed. Almost. But then she turned around and said, You okay? You look like you've been somewhere else. And I smiled because she was right. I had. She kept glancing at me over dinner like she sensed something had shifted but couldn't name it. I played along, even complimented the food, let her pour me a second glass of wine. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that used to feel intimate but now felt like strangers dining in the same room by accident. She told me about her day, carefully omitting anything real. I nodded in the right places, said when it felt required. But inside I had already left. I was just waiting for the clock to catch up. The next morning I was gone before sunrise. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. She would find everything soon enough. The evidence was in a sealed envelope on the kitchen table marked only with her name. Next to it, I placed my wedding ring, not out of anger, out of clarity. I checked into a rental cabin 3 hours away, deep in the mountains near a lake I used to fish at with my father. It was quiet there, clean, no reception, no eyes watching. The kind of place where your heartbeat finally catches up to your breath. I spent the first 2 days doing nothing but walking barefoot through the grass, cooking for one, reading pages I never finished. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like a man without chains. On the 3rd day, my phone buzzed. A single message from Fallon. No apology, no explosion, just, "You planned this. You really planned this." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. I cared about myself again. 2 weeks passed. I got a job offer from a local shop near the lake, a small business that needed someone who knew how to work with aquariums. It paid less, but it felt real. I accepted. Moved my things into a modest apartment nearby. Simple space, windows that faced the sunrise, a dog park down the road. The kind of life that didn't need hiding places. Fallon lost her promotion. I heard through the grapevine, a mutual friend who didn't know the full story, but had enough pieces to speculate. She transferred department shortly after, voluntarily, but the timing said otherwise. Aaron? He disappeared quietly, professionally, just another name erased from the directory, like he was never there. She tried calling me a few more times. I never answered, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was done feeding the loop. One afternoon, I was walking past the lake when I saw a kid tossing stones across the water. His dad was sitting on the bench nearby, smiling. The boy ran up to him and hugged him without needing a reason. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared believe during the worst days. I could still have that joy, peace, maybe even family. Not with Fallon, but someday, with someone who wouldn't laugh their way out of my life. Because now, I wasn't surviving betrayal. I was building something better than what I lost. Something honest, something whole, something mine.